We all felt the creeps when the Night's Watch spent a night at Craster's Keep, especially because the man was marrying his daughters to have incestuous babies with them. But what was even worse was that he sacrificed these kids to the White Walkers, and for the longest time, we didn't know what the creatures used them for. So let's dive into the purpose these babies serve for them. First off, the children were turned into more White Walkers. Yes, most of you probably thought that the creatures were feeding on the poor babies, but instead they were turning them into their kind. Once they were sacrificed to them, Craster and his keep could exist in the insanely scary forest without any disturbance from the other side. It was a pact well in place. But why did they need human babies to add to the already existing army of walkers? Their kind could not reproduce amongst themselves, and if the Night King wanted to increase the size of his army, he had to use young boys for that. We know this because we've been looking back at the Night Queen and how she didn't have any children for the Night's Watch at the time. They just can't do it. But then, you might wonder why they have to be babies. Couldn't adults be turned into White Walkers as well? We think it's all about preference, because it's probably easier for the Night King to shape and mold the babies in whatever way he wishes than adults, who would create much more fuss than necessary. Looking at House of the Dragon now, it makes sense why Aegon was so pressed about keeping the Targaryens on the throne to defend Westeros from the Night King. When we think about it, he probably saw what these creatures do to the babies, which made him see the urgency of how bad it is. Coming up, why did the White Walkers have such an anticlimactic end? The Night King's demise was among the most magnificent red herrings in fantasy history, as it reduced the White Walkers to a mid-season diversion after they had remained the greatest threat to the show since the first season. What they did to Caster's children may have been the scariest event in modern fantasy, which is why it was pretty jarring when they just randomly faced their end. After all, everybody probably expected a lot to go down before they were finally killed off. It's also worth noting that no one important to the main storyline died in the Long Night. Only one person defeated the White Walkers, Urson. The main reason behind this was that the White Walkers had to be an intentional distraction from Daenerys' journey into evil and the final chapter in the Iron Throne's history. But even though they'd like a mastermind level plan in their heads, it just didn't translate into the show because of how rushed everything seemed. The pressure to complete the final 2 seasons was too much, which is why the show bungled its first smart use of the red herring. The White Walkers suffered from the fact that they were such a terrible hidden force early on, and their allure as villains was solely reliant on their mystery, when they were simply another distraction after the mystery was gone. Finally, nothing compares to the baby scene in GOT. The show also failed to take advantage of the shock element of the newborn White Walkers, who were never seen again after their first appearance. But even that was enough to horrify us to our core. Though the violent death scenes and cunning politics make the House of the Dragon a fitting successor to the show, nothing in there was more memorable than what the Walkers did with the infants. Indeed, there is a distinct absence of terror in a series built around the appearance of ill-tempered, scaly, fire-breathing monsters. This terror is what we got in the show from which the prequel generates. And seeing how the White Walkers will probably not be appearing anytime soon, we know that they were an opportunity lost a long time ago. And because HOTD's Season 2 is almost certain to reveal how Harsh Targaryen murdered their dragons while battling among themselves, future seasons will also probably explore harsher imagery and themes from Fire and Blood. There are very few chances they'll go back to explore the already done themes again. GOT was not a horror show, but it still had numerous aspects that wouldn't have been out of place in the category and the emotional reactions these components elicited. We're not talking jump scares, but the psychological aspect that accompanied these White Walkers and their actions, too bone-chilling to ignore. Now let's look at some of the surprisingly inspiring villain quotes from GOT.
For your sins, Lord Renly. The night is dark and full of terrors.
To start, let's talk about Ramsay Bolton's smart words. This character was one of the most sadistic villains of Westeros, and though he has done some exceptionally disturbing things, his words still manage to stay in our minds. In his words, remember what you are and what you are not. We found a great sense of knowledge even though it's a very simple statement.
Remember what you are and what you're not. Bring me Moat Cailin.
He said this to Theon, and even though it was meant to manipulate him to give in, we can see how deep this quote goes. If we look at it without the context that a villain is saying it, it would have the exact opposite, a profound effect on us. How we interpret is it that one shouldn't try to look like something they aren't, but they should remain true to themselves, no matter what happens. And though he did some terrible things with Theon, we found something we'd ponder over just to bring some improvement in our lives. Up next, we've got the High Sparrow's manipulation tactics. We know this character turned out to be an absolute scam in the end, as he was probably the most obscurely bipolar character we encountered in the show. Being played by Jonathan Pryce, he was very closely affiliated with King Tommen, which he eventually took advantage of. He advised him that a true leader avails himself of the wisest counsel he can, and his words were meant to help him dig deeper into the king's mind, but they were still pretty spot on.
Why are you happy?
Because I have your little whore.
Often we think that asking for help will make us seem inferior to others when that is the opposite of the truth. As we see in the character's words, taking advice from the people around us helps us make decisions much wiser, and it only makes a leader better at his job. It also implies that we'd be super picky about who we surround ourselves with, which would make it possible for us to become leaders one day as well, given that we get great advice from our friends and family. And though the High Sparrow's advice was meant to lead the king toward his downfall, we still managed to learn something from it. Coming up, we can't possibly forget to add Littlefinger to this list. Officially being one of the most confusing characters on the show, there is too much he used to say that would just stay in our minds.
1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agreed to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
The character has a knack for going on long, wise speeches, and his character development was beyond amazing. While talking to Sansa Stark in Season 7, he said, "Everything that happens will be something that you've seen before, and once you let it sink in, these few words seem to say a lot." Yes, he is warning and giving some valuable advice to the Stark girl, but more deeply, his words imply that nothing could surprise you when you've seen it all happen.
To get what I want.
And what do you want?
Everything.
No matter how good or bad the outcome is, you'll probably be fine if it's something you've dealt with before, and being prepared helps cushion the blow of any situation you'd face. The character has been known for being pretty conflicted, and though we always got suspicious vibes from him, it was hard not to pay attention to his brilliant words most of the time. Finally, Tywin Lannister said some pretty wise things. This is one of those characters who would still be of great significance even if we hate them from our core. Being one of the family's oldest members, Tywin holds some very important life lessons, one of which is what he said while talking to his son, Jaime. He said, "A lion doesn't concern itself with the opinion of sheep, which place them on a pedestal already too high for the rest to reach."
A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep.
And though the Lannisters are known to be vain and hard to get along with, this is the level of confidence we need in our lives. It doesn't matter which sector of life you belong to, people will always try to bring you down and destroy your confidence.
It is said that the men of the mountain clans are great warriors. Ride with me against my enemies, and you shall have all my son promised you and more.
The main takeaway from his words is that you should think of yourselves as lions and simply not think of what anybody else says, especially the ones who aren't your well-wishers.
Tell your father I'm here. And tell him the Lannisters aren't the only ones who pay their debts.
And that's a wrap, folks. Did the White Walkers horrify you as much as they horrify us all? Tell us in the comments below. And as always, make sure to click that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more updates about your favorite shows. See you in the next video.